Well, greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 208 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm Rick Verbanis, and I'm your host. I got a co-host. He's the best one out there. His name's Bob Lucius. Oh, Bruce. Immanuel Kant was a real pissant who was very rarely stable. Heidegger was a boozy beggar who could think you under the table. David Hume could outconsume Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, and Wittgenstein was a beery swine who was just as sloshed as Schlegel. There's nothing Nietzsche couldn't teach you about the raising of the wrist. Socrates himself was permanently pissed. John Stuart Mill, of his own free will, on half a pint of shandy, was particularly ill. Plato, they say, could stick it away half a crate of whiskey every day. Aristotle was a bugger for the bottle. Hobbes was fond of the dram. And Rene Descartes was a drunken fart. I drink, therefore I
am. That's masterful, Rick. Nicely done.
Yeah, nicely you know what that's from?
I have no idea where that's from.
Oh, okay. That is the Monty Python philosophy song. It's actually Bruce's philosopher's song. And you should Google it because it's a song. I didn't sing it, but yeah. It's about a bunch of Australian philosophers at a university. And they all go by Bruce. Bruce, eh? Is your name Bruce? Hey, Bruce. What does Bruce think? I don't know. What does that other Bruce think?
I think I do recall that. Yeah.
And they'll go there, and then they get into the philosopher's song, which is really witty, really witty. And you have to know the philosophy behind these guys to really truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
So Bob, why am I greeting you with the philosopher's song?
Well, we've got our favorite philosopher on today.
We do.
Yep.
It is Dr. Bruce White. No. That is not his name. No, it's Mark D. White, the philosopher and writer, author of many books, and including one of our favorites about Captain America. And it's a new addition to that book. So 10 years later. And so, yeah, we thought we'd have Mark back on the show for his, I think it's third appearance.
My goodness. Yeah. Too many more. And he will have to get some sort of no prize or something, or maybe some prize. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we should do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bob, how are you? How's your week going?
It's all right. It's okay. Busy as always, you know how it is, Rick. We're in the semester now. So I'm back teaching and taking classes,
Speaking of professors.
Yeah. And we're getting ready. Big weekend, homecoming weekend. So my son asked somebody out on his first date for homecoming.
I saw that. He had a little poster made up and everything.
Apparently that's what you do now. So
no, it's not what you do now. It's been going on for a long time.
Has it? We didn't do that in my time. You didn't have posters.
Dude, you haven't invited anybody out to a prom in how many decades?
I don't think they had poster board back then. I don't know if it had been invented yet. But in any case, so it was an exciting, my wife was, or you can imagine, she was deeply engaged in this process with the attendee's mother. Coordinating things from the background. So anyway, all's well that ends well, and it's Saturday night, so we're all looking forward to that.
Wait, is this upcoming Saturday?
It is, yeah.
Well, no time like the present to invite somebody to she's got to get a dress, for God's sake.
I know. I think they were all planning on going anyway. It's my son hangs out with, he's got, a couple of friends that are guys, and they've got, 5 or 6 that are girls, and they all pal around. And so, they all were going anyway. So.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, there's always the it's not uncommon for girls to go with a bunch of other girls. And,
right. Yeah.
So Bob, I will get into, we do have a birthday to celebrate this week. So if you're listening to this episode when it comes out in the beginning of October 2nd, just a few days later, October 6th is the birthday of comic royalty, one of the Kuberts, and that would be Adam Kubert. And you're asking, like, well, wait a minute. I thought Andy Kubert was the one who did Captain America. Well, that's because you probably didn't read the Coates Captain America series that came out in 2019. Adam Kubert did a six-part story in that. It was Captain America 7 through 12 and was called Captain America of Nothing. So anyway, Adam had done some Captain America work, so we wanted to wish him a happy birthday.
There you go. Happy birthday, Adam.
Bob, the other thing we have to get through, and this won't take very long, is we did, oh, I don't know, just a couple episodes ago we did this thing called the Captain America Fantasy Draft.
Oh, we did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we asked our listeners to go on the Facebook page and to vote, and
Right.
they voted, and so that's over. Anyway, so for next episode, what we're gonna do is
Oh, hey, hold on a minute there, Rick.
yes, yes,
I
Bob,
noticed
yeah.
you didn't mention the results. You sort of
Oh, well, Bob, it's really not
glossed
so
on by.
much about, who won, who
Did
lost.
everybody have fun?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We all get a trophy, right?
Do we all get a trophy? I'm not so sure
Yeah.
about that.
Well,
Yeah, I don't remember that from the previous two times. But in any case, yeah.
oh, well, yeah. All right. So, uh, I did not do a hat trick. I did not win three in a row, Bob.
Oh no! You
Yeah,
don't say.
yeah. That's okay. Well, and listen, I'm just having fun. But no,
Yeah.
you want me to go through the results?
Yeah, let's do that. I
Okay.
got to be honest with you. I haven't looked recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Was when you say recently, was this after, like, you haven't done it since you were cheating, or since you like
Cheating.
did?
It's not a rule if it's not written down, Rick.
Oh, okay. It's true. Apparently, apparently on this next one, I'm gonna have to be so crystal clear
You will.
and
Yes.
drum tight,
Yes.
because you're
Yes.
going in there and you're like, I'm gonna change the order of my story thing here, because it makes more sense,
But
uh,
it has no practical impact other than clarity. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, whatever rule works for you after the fact. So, so anyway, the winner is, you know what? Wait a minute. Maybe we should build a little suspense
oh,
here.
yeah, do this.
Maybe we should start with last place and go to
Yeah.
first place and build
All
some
right.
suspense. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Okay.
that always works.
All right. Well, in last place was Bob.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
But it was close. It was close, Bob.
Mhm.
You had 14% of the votes
All right.
for your story,
All right.
and then at 15%, again, very close,
Mhm.
was Matthew.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you guys were neck and neck for in terms of votes.
Mhm.
Then I came in second place at 24%.
Okay.
Right? And then first place was none other than Tom Boyd, our friend from across the Atlantic.
Preparation
He
Tom.
he got 47%. He got
Yeah.
double the amount of votes that I got.
Yeah.
So kudos to him. It was fun. I mean, listen, no one put more into
No.
this than Tom.
Nobody has ever or ever will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he was awesome.
yeah, he didn't quite understand that we were supposed to give an overview of our story,
Yeah.
and not like panel by panel,
A
page by page.
novelization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because he couldn't get through it, in his 4-minute allotment, which I think you said ended up being almost 5 minutes,
Yeah.
he decided to do this really nice
It was
illustration,
awesome.
and he posted that to give himself more explanation of his story. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
listen, I love the enthusiasm.
I do too. I do too. Very creative.
Yeah,
Very creative and very committed.
yeah, absolutely. So, kudos to you, Tom.
Yeah.
Well deserved. You definitely won this draft. So, again, kudos.
Yes. You're going to like challenge him to a rematch
Uh,
next time around?
yeah.
Episode
I mean, listen, if we want to
draft 4?
expand it to more than 4 people, yeah, we'll have to think that
Yeah,
through. I
think it
mean,
through.
because we don't want it to be too long.
No, no, yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. It gets confusing.
Um, it does. But
People nod
anyway,
off. Yeah,
that was definitely a lot of fun, and we will do it again in April.
awesome.
Yeah. You know what? I am excited for our guest today. We should probably let him out of the green room. What do you think?
Yeah, let's jump into this. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we're happy to have back as our guest Dr. Mark White, who is the department chair for philosophy at City University of New York's College of Staten Island, where he teaches courses about the intersections among economics, philosophy, and law. Professor White is the author of 11 books, including The Virtues of Captain America, Modern Day Lessons on Character from a World War II Superhero, which the second edition came out this year. In addition to his extensive list of authored books and chapters and journal articles and popular media articles, uh, and not to mention op-eds addressing a wide range of philosophical matters, Professor White has also been a frequent contributor and editor in the Blackwell Philosophy and Pop Culture series, which introduces readers to basic philosophical concepts using movies and TV shows and comic books and music that they love. And Dr. White also publishes several blogs, such as The Comics Professor and The Virtues of Captain America Companion, basically, publishing hundreds of blog posts covering every Tales of Suspense Captain America story, the majority of Captain America Volume 1, which was from 1964 to 1997, as well as the Avengers during those same years, all the volumes of the Invaders, and then most recently, Volume 2 of Captain America. So our guest certainly knows Cap. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. It's always fun waxing philosophy with our favorite professor of Captain America philosophy coming back on the show. This will be your third time. It's actually kind of odd, Mark. Last time you were on here was episode 108, and here it is, episode 208. It's just perfect symmetry.
Yeah.
We're getting to be like SNL, Rick.
That's
You
true.
know,
Actually, there's a couple other podcasts I've been on 5 times, and I asked them,
really?
when do I get the jacket?
Yeah, I know. I feel like there has to be something, right?
You guys have 2 times to go.
Well, we had you back on the show originally back in episode 30, and that was we had a lot of fun discussing a lot of topics that you covered in your book at that time, which is, by the way, fascinating read for any Captain America fan. If you have not read the book, do yourself a favor and pick that up. And the book covers through volume 7, and which ended around 2014. And then when we had you on an episode 108, you talked about you were in the process of starting to work on the next edition of this because you wanted to get into the next 10 years of Captain America. And I think you said you were starting to reread those 10 years at that time, 2 years ago. And so this new edition takes us through 2022 of Captain America comics. I have to ask, what was it about the recent stories that really motivated you to explore them in a new addition to this book?
Well, it was 10 whole years since I finished. I think when I finished the last comics that I could put into the first edition, I think I added a couple references in the copy editing stage. I don't think Captain America was out of Dimension Z yet at the beginning of Rick Remender's run, Volume 7. I don't think he knew that Sharon Carter was alive yet. So we had the whole rest of that run. At the end of that run, of course, Captain America becomes aged when the super soldier serum is eliminated in his blood, passes the shield on to Sam Wilson. And he started his on and off relationship with the identity of Captain America. So that was the first thing I wanted to discuss, is I wanted to add substantive content about Sam Wilson into the book. And then the second thing was just the additional adventures that Steve Rogers went through over the next 10 years. Of course, he got his youth back pretty quickly after Secret Wars. And then he, of course, infamously became brainwashed by the Red Skull to become a Hydra operative. And so that whole Secret Empire storyline that spawned out of that was pretty much the second huge event in the comics that I wanted to cover in the book. And so, I mean, there's updates sprinkled throughout the book with new examples and new citations because obviously it's been 10 years of comics. A lot of stuff's happened over the last 10 years. But those two events, Sam Wilson becoming the first really, permanent replacement or companion Captain America to Steve Rogers, and the whole Secret Empire episode, which of course was very controversial, very shocking to the comics community, especially Captain America fans.
Yeah, I have to say, it's always a topic of oh, I don't know, Bob. What would you say? Turmoil, nail, teeth gnashing. When Hydra Cap comes up in the Captain America comic book fans Facebook group, we always have to be on our alert to make sure that the no negativity rule stays in effect.
Yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, Mark, this is one of the most prominent additions, I think, in your revised edition to the Virtues of Captain America. You spend quite a bit of time, looking at that Nick Spencer run where the Red Skull uses the sentient cosmic cube Kobik to basically reprogram Cap's memories and his ideology and turn him into this fascist leader, the Hydra Cap. And as Rick pointed out quite accurately, when this does come up in the Facebook group, it tends to be a very contentious discussion because some folks either really like that run or some folks really hate it. And I get it. It is
Sure.
quite a departure from what we're used to seeing. But you leaned pretty heavily into this with the extent that you analyze the Hydra Cap and his take on some of the virtues that maybe we are used to seeing in the Steve Rogers Cap, but sort of play out in a very different way.
Right.
So I want to ask you, I mean, your thoughts on Spencer's run. Was it an aberration in the Cap mythos, or is there something that we can learn about Cap and his virtues by looking at the mirror universe version of him?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings, like a lot of people. When I first read it, obviously month to month when it first came out, I was as shocked as anybody when the last page of the first issue of Steve Rogers Captain America had him saying Hail Hydra, and everyone's mind exploded. And I remember all the online discourse about this is a betrayal of the character, this is a betrayal of Lee and Kirby, this is turning the greatest champion of equality into a symbol of anti-Semitism or fascism. And I completely respect because a lot of my friends said that and were very upset about that. And I don't want to disrespect them. But I also remember way back in Tales of Suspense 66, I think it was, when the Red Skull first turned Cap into a fascist, and he had Cap give the Nazi salute, and he had him meet Hitler in the next issue and swear his allegiance to the Third Reich. And I mean, this was Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's own story when they did that. So I thought all the outrage over just him saying these words was a little much. I remember I wrote a blog post after that first issue came out, and I said, let's just hold on. Nick Spencer's a good writer. Let's hope. I predicted wrongly, but I predicted that it would just be a great redemption story, because how else can the Red Skull more deeply hurt Captain America than to make him betray his own principles, his own virtues, what define him as a man, other than to make him betray those. And what's the ultimate betrayal but to join his fascist opponents? So I was hoping it would be similar to what happened in Dan Slott's Superior Spider-Man when Doc Ock took over Peter Parker's brain became the superior Spider-Man for a while, but then the little sliver of Peter Parker's personality that was still in his mind fought its way back and took his mind over from Doc Ock at the end. I hoped that was what was going to happen with Steve Rogers, that there would be some glimmer of the original Steve Rogers still in his mind, that by sheer willpower and determination would conquer the, we didn't know at the time what happened, but whatever brainwashing or alternate universe transformation or whatever it was. And then I was surprised when the second issue they revealed everything. They revealed what they did with the Cosmic Cube and the reprogramming and the new memories and everything. And I was kind of surprised at that, because I also remember the online discussion being at the time that that was kind of a cheap out. That, even if people were upset about it, you would have thought they'd drag it out for six issues and then have the next arc reveal the true story.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they just didn't want people to be upset that long. Or, of course, we know the comics are written months ahead of time. It's not like they could have rushed the second issue out. But it was a strange choice of timing. But in the end, of course, that isn't what happened. It wasn't a redemption story, because what happens at the end in issue Secret Empire 10 is that Kobik, is that what the name of the sentient cube was? Right.
Yeah.
Kobik recreates the original Steve Rogers from her memories into a new being, and he defeats Hydra Cap. So you get the original Cap back, though it's actually not
but not really
physically.
Yeah. Right.
It's his mind as she remembers it, which is, of course we all forget that now. It's Cap again, everything's fine. But it wasn't the redemption I was looking for. That wasn't, Cap battling back, except as he kind of did in her mindscape when he was kind of walking through the woods and, meeting up with people and remembering who he was. It wasn't the redemption story I wanted. But in hindsight, when I reread the whole thing, in probably a week in preparation for the second edition of the book, I was really impressed by how the story was laid out, not only in the main series, but in the tie-ins, both Captain America books, the Avengers books. Everything fit in. It was laid out so well, and it was an incredibly thoughtfully dense storyline. And I think that's why I thought, and that's why I included so much about it in the book, because love it or hate it as a story, and love it or hate it as an addition to Captain America's life, it's a fantastic story to learn from as far as how fascism works, to borrow the title of Jason Stanley's book. Is because I don't know if this is what Spencer intended, but he really has Cap, as I lay out in the new sections in the book. He really has Hydra Cap trace out all the key elements of how fascism influences society with all its different tools, all the different strategies. It's almost as if Spencer was writing a textbook himself, which like I said, I didn't realize that when I read it 1 month at a time originally, but reading as a whole body of work at once, it really impressed me.
Wow. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get Nick Spencer on the show, right, Rick? And maybe we can ask him that question.
I'm working on it, Bob.
I know.
So let's get back to the new edition. So on page 96, getting into the Secret Empire, you actually quote the issue 0 from Secret Empire, and the narrator was talking about Cap, and they say, quote, he had always been a master strategist, but freed from compassion and mercy, this was his masterpiece. Could you kind of expand on that a bit more? So are you suggesting that perhaps what Spencer's trying to convey here in this run is how Steve's compassion and mercy tempers his other values, or maybe perhaps even restrains his freedom of action?
I think what he meant by that, and why I quoted that line, was I think the narrator, who is never clear who that was, that really frustrated me.
Yeah.
But ask Nick that if you get him on the show. But I think what they were saying was that because Cap has two sorts of virtues, and I talked about this in the first edition of the book as well. You have the more substantive virtues like courage and honor and honesty and humility. And then you have what philosophers call executive virtues, such as determination and willpower and integrity. And the executive virtues really help a person act on their substantive virtues. So it's great if you have compassion and honesty, but if you don't have the determination and willpower to put them into use when they're needed, they're no good. Okay. Well, I think what that quote meant is once you take his compassion and mercy away, which happened when Kobik, transformed him, she didn't take away his determination and willpower and resolve.
Mm-hmm.
But she replaced the compassion and mercy with more negative traits such as hate and division and a hunger for power. So I think what the quote means is you see what happens when a man with that much determination and willpower changes his substantive character traits from good ones to bad ones. And you see what happens when you have a man with that much mental power not working for good, but working for evil. I think that's what it meant. Is you took this man, you took away his good aspects, you put bad ones in, but he has just as much mental power to put those into action. That's
Yeah,
how I interpreted that quote.
I hear what you're saying, because I know the first time we had you on, you were talking about how Cap is one of the few characters that is actually defined by his morality.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good example of what happens when that gets stripped.
Yeah.
You've added, you've added quite a bit of material to this new edition and on fascism, as a political ideology and moral philosophy, contrasting it with cosmopolitanism, which you addressed, a lot in the previous edition.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to the listeners the difference between these two outlooks, and then how the original Steve Rogers and the Hydra Cap Steve Rogers kind of exemplify these different worldviews?
Okay. Well, cosmopolitanism is just, like you said, that was in the first volume because that's a central element of Cap's sort of more political philosophy. It's just a belief that all countries, all nations, all peoples have value and deserve consideration and respect. I mean, you can love your own country, you can believe your own country is the best, but a cosmopolitan also believes that other countries have value, deserve consideration, deserve respect. Your country may disagree with your other countries, your country may even oppose other countries. But that's a matter of politics, that's a matter of government. So you don't necessarily have to have anything against the citizens of other countries, even if you're currently in opposition to the government of another country. So that's kind of what I called in the first edition another way to describe Cap's moderate patriotism. In other words, it's not, my country is right because it's right and that's it. Okay, Captain America obviously loves America. He believes in American values and he believes in trying to spread those to the world as much as they want to embrace them. But he also loves other countries, wants to help other countries, help the people of other countries. He doesn't regard them as less. And that is contrasted most directly with nationalism. I'll talk about fascism in next, but contrasted most directly with nationalism, which is kind of the more extreme version of patriotism that says, my country only. My country is best, not because it has the best values or not because it has the best policies or not because it treats its people the best, but simply because it's my country.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like, supporting your local sports team because it's your local sports team. Even if they stink one year, you're still going to support them because they're your team. Really, there's no rational argument for why your team is better than another team, except insofar as they win more games. But you just love them because they're your team. Okay,
I
but it
think
doesn't mean
you
you
lost Bob in
necessarily.
that reference.
Yeah, I don't know
Mark.
what you're talking about. So.
He doesn't follow sports, so
Okay,
all right.
I'm not a big sports guy either, but But the whole idea that, when you're a sports fan, whatever sport it is, let's say it's
Yeah.
baseball, when you're a baseball fan, you love the game. Of course, you root for your own team, but that doesn't mean you necessarily hate
Well,
other teams. Even if you have a rivalry, even if it's like the Mets and the Yankees, of course, Mets and Yankee fans don't like each other, but they don't actually hate each other. At least most of them don't.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're an American or a citizen of any country, you love your country, you support your country, but you don't always have to think your country is right. You can think your country is wrong once in a while. Okay. That doesn't make you any less of a patriot, just, because you can assess your country relatively objectively. I don't have my glasses on. I can't see what that. I hate the cowboy. Well, that's one exception. That's a good exception.
I'm sorry. I could you speak up a little louder? I was my hat was a little too tight here. So.
But the nationalism is just sort of a very simplistic, brute force form of patriotism. Where again,
Yeah.
you believe your country is the best just because it's your country and your country is always right and other countries are always wrong, and you really put your country and your people above everyone else, and you consider it a battle even when with your allies, much less your enemies. And it causes it very much leads to a zero-sum game mentality. In other words, you have to dominate other countries. You forget that we can cooperate with other countries. We can achieve mutual goals through political agreements and trade agreements and agreements on creating and spreading vaccines and fighting hunger. That it doesn't always have to be dominating other countries. And that's what nationalists tend to do. Fascism is just a kind of, I guess there'd be a Venn diagram with nationalism, where fascism is just additional elements added to nationalism, where fascism is also an approach to, one's own country, not so much looking towards other countries. So fascism is really a political ideology that's opposed to democracy. It's focused on power. It's usually focused on one person, a central figure, a strong man, as some call it. And that strong man usually comes to power through dividing the populace into us and them, where us are the chosen people, us are the ones that the powerful people prefer and support, and they anger those people against the other, them.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a racial minority, that could be a gender minority, a sexuality-based minority, it could be a minority based on national origin or immigration. But the fascist usually succeeds by dividing the populace and again setting the in-group against the out-group and stoking fear, stoking hatred, stoking violence. And by that way, the fascist leaders get the loyalty of the group they prefer and use them to help oppress the group they don't. And then usually they do this by calling back to what Jason Stanley calls, he is historian, scholar, or philosopher, scholar of fascism, um, calls the mythic past, by calling, we can restore the golden age, we can restore
Mm-hmm.
our wonderful country to what it used to be before these other people got too much power, too much consideration, whatever.
Well,
Back when the us, the preferred, the in group were rightly dominant in their terms.
let's circle back around to that idea a little bit later, Mark. But I do want to ask you. I want to drill down a little bit on that about this methodology of division, right? Because there's actually a pretty good conversation that takes place. I think it was in issue 17 of Steve Rogers' Captain America, and it's when the Hydra Cap is he's consented to an interview with a journalist by the name of Sally Floyd.
Who also interviewed Steve Rogers during the original Civil War.
Right, right.
And they got the same artist to illustrate both issues, which I thought was just fantastic.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, it was the art Raymond Box.
Okay.
Was the same artist who illustrated that issue of Civil War Frontline, where Sally Floyd interviews. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
back then Captain America was underground. He was leading the Rebel Avengers against registration. But she arranged the interview with him, and it was that same artist that illustrated the issue 17 of Steve Rogers' Captain
Yeah.
America, with her interviewing now Hydra Cap.
All right.
I just my mind was blown when I saw that. I said, "Oh my gosh, they put so much thought into this."
That's some attention to detail. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a great conversation, right? And of course,
Mhm.
some things that have been made off limits to Sally, but
Mm.
in the course of this interview, it does tend to surface, I think, several differences between the Hydra Cap and the OG Cap, if I may. And one of
I'm
those,
sorry, Bob. I'm sorry. The what cap?
the OG,
Okay, Bob.
yeah,
You know how old our listeners are, right?
the original. Yeah, word. I have a 14-year-old son, man. So and one of those things is, I think, how they view people, and in particular, the people that matter.
Right.
And there's a really, severe difference, I think, that gets surfaced in this conversation about who's important, who do
Mhm.
we look out for, who do we take care of, and who is outside of our circle of concern, our circle of compassion, whatever you want to, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. So can you maybe drill down a little bit on that?
Well, in the comic storyline, I think in that passage, Sally Floyd was asking Captain America about all the people whose liberties have been curtailed, who have been scared into hiding, who have been intimidated by Hydra forces and Hydra Cap supporters. And she says, "What about all these people that are being hurt by this?" And he said, "Well, I'd rather focus on the people that matter. I'd rather focus on the people that have new jobs. I'd rather focus on the people that are flourishing." Because implicitly those are the people that we're working for, and those also happen to be the people that are supporting the Hydra initiative. And the people that aren't supporting them don't matter by implication. And also the Marvel analog for the out group, whether it's mutants or Inhumans. And in this storyline, Hydra Cap is particularly heinous towards Inhumans, using, he gives one speech where he says, why should good people have to live next to them? They come from another world. They don't follow our ways. They don't have our culture, our beliefs. Why should people have to live next to that? And he calls them that, not even, dehumanizing them, besides being inhumans, but, they're obviously people in the more general sense. But he dehumanizes them, and he cuts a deal with the mutants to give them an island to get them out of the way, but pretends that he conquered them, that he drove them out.
I mean, it is shocking, right? Because when we
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of the original Steve Rogers, I mean, he is the guy that looks out for the folks that
right.
are being oppressed
Of
or
course, the
exploited or
paragon of
out.
inclusivity, right,
Yeah,
right. I
exactly.
was
Yeah.
always looking out for people. That's the one thing I really loved about when all this was over, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I don't know if we're going to talk about this later. But the first issue of Captain America after all this was over, when Mark Waid and Chris Samney came on for like 8 or 10 issues, just to bridge the gap between Secret Empire and Ta-Nehisi Coates' run. And the first issue was he went. I'm sketchy on the details, but he went out to some. He did another one of his trips on the motorcycle to see
Yeah.
America, to revisit America, show them that he's back. He's back with them. He's back with supporting their values and their dreams. And I think he goes to some town where there's a Captain America festival,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
terrorist attack or white supremacist attack, and he's got to defend everybody. And he's got these little. I think there's two little kids, an older sister and a younger brother, and he and I think at the very, I can't remember what goes on throughout the whole issue, but at the end of the issue, he has to tell her, okay, just keep your brother safe. That's what we have to do. We have to look out for people that aren't as strong as us, or aren't,
The
as big
strong
as
protect
us.
the weak,
That's the
Right,
I think
rule.
is what he
right,
said.
right,
That's the rule.
exactly. You
Yeah.
stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. And at the end of the issue, she affirms that. And it's kind of the sense that we're back.
Yeah.
And plus, it kind of sets up this new, it kind of follows, it's got a nice continuity from Remender's whole thing, where Steve's mother taught him always stand up, always stand up.
Mhm.
It's kind of like the movie thing, I can do this all day. And
Right.
then he kind of enhances that, because that was implicitly stand up for yourself, don't get beaten down, always get back up. And Waid and Samney kind of expanded that to be stand up not just for yourself, but stand up for others, stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's like I always mention this. There's this great animated movie called Barnyard. It's on the surface a very silly movie about the animals in a barnyard, and they're all of course talking and walking around, and they have a little society, and their leader is one of the cows, who's voiced by Sam Elliott. So he's got the deep authoritative voice, and he's trying to raise his son, who's this bratty impetuous teenager, just wants to party and have fun. But he's got this great line where he says, and he for some reason he says man instead of cow, but I guess that would be silly if he said cow. He says a strong man stands up for himself, a stronger man stands up for others. Except it's Sam Elliott. I mean, Sam Elliott saying it, so it's much better than Mark White saying it. But a strong man stands up for himself. A stronger man stands up for others.
I love it.
And that's the whole feeling I got from that issue, from Mark Waid and Chris Samnee's first issue. Bring us back into the us versus them thing. It shows again that the real Captain America, supports everybody, includes everybody, treats everyone as equal. I mean, think of the last big page in Kirby's Bicentennial Battles, when you have Captain America with all the kids of every race, every ethnicity, saying we all have a great future. We all have the opportunity that America gives us. We all can make of it what we can. We're all in this together. It's a beautiful, like the last major spread in that book. And that's really what Steve Rogers, like you said, that's what Steve Rogers is all about. And that's why Hydra Cap, again, is such a stark contrast. And that, no, we're only supporting some of the people, and we're going to drive them against the other people.
Yeah.
And of course, that division among the people just makes it easier for the fascists to claim power, because they don't have a unified people to stand up against them.
Mark, there's something, another thing that I think really got, you drilled down to in this revised edition, and that is how the Hydra Cap sees compromise differently. So, I mean, we know that the OG Cap, right? Steve Rogers, he understands that he's a very principled guy, is guided by his virtues, but he understands there's a necessity sometimes, even in principled action, to compromise, right? And he sees that compromise not as a weakness, but as a strength, his ability to do what needs to be done in order to have the most effective and palatable outcome. But the Hydra Cap sees compromise very differently, sees it not as a strength, but maybe something else, right? And certainly his view of what constitutes principled action is very different than what we would expect from the original Steve Rogers. So could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, this is a great illustration of how fascism works, and that Hydra Cap is so focused on strength, not letting other people win, not appearing weak. And a lot of this is about appearance, not even true strength in even the simplest sense, but appearing strong. Because again, the fascist movement is usually led by a strong man, a Mussolini, a Hitler. Okay, where they serve as a symbol for the people that they approve of to stand behind. And this doesn't work if you don't come off as strong. And so you at least have to appear strong. I mentioned that, cutting a deal with the mutants to get them out of the way, but then representing in public that you defeated them and you banished them, when actually you didn't. You came to a deal with them. And the idea, this importance of projecting strength all the time also leads you to diminish the idea of even thinking of compromise, even thinking of negotiating with other countries. You don't negotiate with other countries, you tell them what you're going to do. Or you don't negotiate with certain, disapproved groups within your country, you tell them what they're going to do. You don't accept, even negotiation itself is compromise, because you're not setting all the terms. Okay, so compromise to a fascist means a crack in that armor of illusory strength that you've built up around yourself. Where and you described the Steve Rod, the original Cap perfectly. He doesn't like compromise. He wants to uphold all his principles, but sometimes those principles conflict, and you can't support both of them at the same time. So you have to let one go. I think the first time we talked a lot about the episode with the ultimatum agent around issue 322 something of the original run, where he had to shoot and kill the ultimatum agent to stop him from gunning down people in the church. And he tortured himself for a year after that over this, because I should have avoided that. I should have planned better, which I shouldn't have been in that situation, even though once he was in that situation, he literally had no other choice. So he realizes he has to compromise, but I mean, you said it very well. I don't think I could say it better. He recognizes that compromise as part of strength because he sees strength more holistically. He says he sees strength in terms of doing the right thing, even if it may seem weak, even if it may seem like compromise. The importance is doing the right thing and being strong and helping others and supporting others, and the whole, stronger man looks out for those who can't look out for themselves. That wouldn't be strong to a fascist. A fascist, thinks they look stronger by beating other people down. The OG Captain America thinks he's stronger, or feels stronger if he helps other people up. So
Yeah.
I love that they pointed out, because that's one of the I hate to keep using Starkist. I don't want to give Tony any more royalties than we have to, but yeah, that's one of the starkest distinctions between the
Right.
two. Is
Yeah.
obviously they both have their ideas of strength, but they're completely different.
Yeah. Well, there's one more I want to mention, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, and it's this idea of the golden age, right? This mythical history. And again, if this story does and you do a really nice job in the book contrasting, I think, even though maybe not explicitly, but certainly implicitly, you contrast how the Hydra Cap views history with the original Cap, right? Because the original Cap's a man out of time, right? He's lived history, right? And he's faced now with this realization that he's not going back, right? It's not the MCU.
Right.
And in Mark Waid's Man Out of Time miniseries, the president tells him,
Oh,
you're not going back, right?
Yeah.
So you're stuck now. And so you can continue to sort of reify history, or you can choose to adapt to the modern world. But the Hydra Cap takes a little bit different tact, right? He creates this illusion of history,
Yeah.
and in all fairness, the history that he remembers is is Kobik's reprogrammed history, right? But it's this idea that a golden age of history is what's going to unify the followers.
Right.
And so can you maybe drill down on that a little bit, because I found that really fascinating, the way that you explored that.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, yeah, that's I mean, real world fascists invent this mythic past to motivate their followers. The world used to be ours, now it's theirs. We have to take it back and create this golden age when we were in charge and everyone listened to us. Even if that was unearned privilege, that was right because it's what we deserve. And what Hydra did in the story was actually, you know, changed that memory in Cap's mind, but then imposed it on everybody else once Hydra took over the world. You changed the textbooks, you changed the lessons in school. If anyone questioned, wait a minute, I thought the Allies won World War II. Well, that's what they wanted you to think. Hydra actually won. We're correcting the record. We're bringing truth back.
Like the
And we're
grand illusion, right?
right,
That's,
the
I think,
grand
what they
illusion
called
they
it.
called
Yeah.
it. And they and of course, to do that, fascists have to suppress journalists, they have to control education, because they can't let any objective measure of truth interfere with their imposition of their own version of truth. And the Steve Rogers, the OG Cap, he recognizes history, and he certainly remembers some of it nostalgically, but he also remembers the darker aspects of it. Like you mentioned, Mark Waid's Man on a Time miniseries, when he goes back to the past to look for Bucky after the war ended, and he notices things that he didn't necessarily notice when he was part of that world. He didn't notice the racism that he didn't pick up on. He didn't notice the sexism that now he sees because he's gotten used to the relatively modern world. And so he realizes the past wasn't a golden age. It has generally gotten better, even if not for people like him, than for people who were neglected, racial minorities, sexual minorities, etc. And says their status in society has been lifted up. And of course, that's what the dominant group fears, is they again, it's this zero-sum game mentality where the dominant group feels they're losing if the oppressed groups get a little more recognition, a little more respect, a little more status. Okay, but Cap sees that as a good thing. The idea that history bends towards justice, that slowly society improves. Again, this is the process and progress that fascists fear, and they want to turn back. So while Cap may look back at certain aspects of history fondly, he realizes that the world wasn't all great back then, especially not for everybody, and especially not for the people that he now wants to help lift up.
So after Secret Empire is over, there's you mentioned already, right? The Mark Waid, Chris Samney run that takes place. And so they talk a little bit about the American Dream. And this is another part of this new edition that you beefed up in chapter 6, talking about the American Dream. And there's a fallout from the Secret Empire, right? So there's the um, kind of seeing that the American Dream means different things to different people.
Mhm.
And so we see that, there's a scene there where the original Steve is talking to the Hydra Steve in the detention center. And at that point, the Hydra Cap reminds Steve
Mhm.
that a lot of Americans went along with
Mhm.
Hydra. And not because they were forced to, right? Just because they were sympathetic towards, the cause, or and even if not Hydra, then at least for what Hydra's version of the American dream was, right? Which centered
Right.
around security and prosperity.
Right.
And
For
then,
some. For some.
yes,
Yeah.
Including the people who bought into it because they were included in that group.
exactly.
Right.
Right. So they have a different view of the American dreams than say others would, right? So you go on to suggest that Cap's experiences traveling around the country and talking to everyday Americans lead him to, quote, reconsider his understanding of the American dream as well. So he does expound on this in the following miniseries, right? The United States of Captain America, that came out in 21. But could you maybe walk us through how you think Steve's outlook on the American dream was impacted by what he saw, what he experienced in the events of Secret Empire?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it starts with what you very accurately described was this Hydra Cap telling him, I didn't, steal the power I got. They gave it to me. I mean, Hitler was elected. That whole idea that,
Mm.
fascists don't take their power. They build support and gain it democratically, and then once they're in power, they then weaken the democratic process so they can retain power. And we saw that in that great conversation between Steve and Hydra Cap. And then we see it also, there's a storyline in Ta-Nehisi Coates' run where where he and Sam go to some factory town where the descendants of Hydra are kind of building another fascist movement, promising that, economic progress will be kept for real Americans,
Hmm.
quote unquote. And Steve kind of wonders what was real America when Pearl Harbor was attacked. We were all upset. That was real America. I don't get this division, which was perfect. And then in the United States of Captain America miniseries by Christopher Cantwell was the writer. I can't remember who the artist was. But the first issue starts out with, I mean, I couldn't quote enough of this. This is just brilliant. The first 5 or 6 pages are just this inner monologue of Captain America reflecting on all these events that happened and how they've made him view the different ways that people see the American dream. I mean, he's been debating the American dream ever since the whole, Stan Lee's short kind of campus revolt period in the early days of Captain America when Gene Colan was drawing it and he was going to student
Hmm.
protests and finding out that not everyone had the same view of America as he is, and maybe he should start listening more. Maybe he should find out what other people are thinking. And but I don't think that was as stark a change in heart as he had after Secret Empire. when he started realizing there are really two distinct American dreams. There's the one he's always believed in, which is about creating opportunity for everybody. And then the second American dream, which really seems more focused on limiting the first American dream to just the deserving few, the
Mhm.
real Americans, the ones who for whatever reason deserve to pursue that opportunity where others don't, where others are stealing it, where others are taking it. And, Steve realizes that, he has to decide which he can't just say I'm fighting for the American dream anymore because some Americans don't share his idea of the American dream. But he doesn't want to demonize those people. He really wants to understand them and eventually try to change their mind to make them realize that the American dream ideally is for everybody. I mean, there's another. I think it was a backup story in some anniversary issue where he's eulogizing a Korean friend of his, Sungji Jung, I think was his name, and he says he was an immigrant who came to this country, barely spoke English, little education, ran a business, earned a law degree, and started working as an immigration lawyer, helping more people become citizens. And he says he fought discrimination, he fought bias, he fought hatred, he fought racism, and he just kept fighting because he had this mission. And he knew, I think it's in that story that Steve uses the phrase that, if we don't preserve the American dream, the ideal version of the American dream as opportunity for everybody, then it's going to become the American lie for too many
Mhm.
or for anybody. But if the American dream is denied, it's the American lie, because then people are told they can come here and get opportunity. But if it's then withheld from them because of their national origin or their race or their religion, then it's the American lie. And of course, that's what Steve doesn't want to happen. And again, it's just a beautiful story. I wish I could remember who wrote it. But it's a beautiful little story tacked on to the end of a 700 issue or something, some big
Was
anniversary.
that J.M. DeMatteis?
No, I don't think it was. I think I would remember if it was him. I think it was some newer writer, some younger writer.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Mark. Some younger writer. But I
uh,
know it was somebody I know too. That's why I know
that's all
exactly
right.
book,
One
but
of
I
our
can't
listeners
remember it.
will tell us who it
I'm
is.
sure they
So
will.
yeah. I just want to piggyback on that because of the two different versions, the viewpoints of the American dream that you just kind of discussed. Takes us back to a question when we had you on, well, way back in episode 30. Was the J. Michael Straczynski's, no, you move,
Oh,
quote, right? And we talked about that.
yeah,
We actually had JMS on the show, episode
right,
178. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that, but we asked him point blank, about that because it's debatable, right? We get
right.
different
No,
views
you
on it.
you made a great point back then. Yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, he agreed that it's something for up for interpretation, but he said everything's up for interpretation.
right.
And just because everything's up for interpretation doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it.
Sure, sure.
And because otherwise, then the bad guys do win because you don't say something and then they take that as a mean to move forward. So,
Right, right.
um, and I
And
just
to mention, can I piggyback on that
yeah,
and say that I was able to put a really quick citation to the first issue of J. Michael Straczynski's current Cap run in this second edition of the book. And I loved how he starts out that run where he buys the old tenement where he grew up and he restores
yeah,
it, and he sees the immigrant family living in their van outside the building and finds out that the father is a plumber or a contractor or an electrician or something, and says, "Hey, why don't you come help rebuild my tenement and you can live in one of the apartments while you're working on it?" And I mean that just, oh my gosh, this he gets it. I mean, obviously
yeah,
he gets it, but this is again continuing that thing of lifting other people up, helping other people, not giving them charity, but giving them a job, giving them a chance, and that'll allow this guy and his family to get another step up the ladder to self-sufficiency. But that whole thing, that I just love that whole idea of Cap, not, kind of revisiting his own past, reclaiming his
Mm-hmm.
childhood, which wasn't easy itself, but again, always looking for a way to help others. And but making them think that they're doing him a favor. Hey, I really need to get this electricity. Do you know anyone that can do this? Because I got a room people can stay in. Oh, can you do this for me? That's the a lot of philosophers say that's the best way to help people, is to make them think they're helping you.
Mm-hmm.
That way, it doesn't feel like charity. It doesn't offend them. It doesn't make them feel lesser. It makes them feel better because they're helping you.
Yeah.
And he does that masterfully. Just in the first issue, the whole run has been fantastic. But the first few issues, where he's really reaching out to the local community and building ties among a wide variety of people, that really touched me. Plus all the scenes of young Steve, between the period where his mom died and he became Captain America, kind of confronting the growing Nazi movement in America and already standing up to them,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
long before he was, Captain America, but just scrawny Steve Rogers, going to these Nazi rallies and standing up to them and saying, "What are you saying? Why, how can you hold this? Who made you right?"
Yeah, it's brilliant writing. If you're
Yeah.
a Steve Rogers fan, it's really, really good writing.
Mhm.
But listen, we have been talking way too much about Hydra Cap. There's more to do your new edition than just Hydra Cap, such as Sam Wilson, as you mentioned before. So
Exactly.
but I'm going to turn it over to Bob so Bob can ask about Sam Wilson, because we feel like we're not giving him enough,
Yeah.
love here.
Yeah. So definitely, it's worth picking up this new edition. If not for the Hydra Cap stuff, but certainly for the addition to Chapter 7, where you really do take a deep dive into Sam Wilson's turn as Cap, right? And contrasting the different ways that Steve Rogers and Sam maybe see that mantle differently, and what it means to be Cap. So I like what you've done, because you sort of do a brief discussion of some of the other guys that have worn that mantle, that have taken it on over the years. But then you did really spend quite a bit of time talking about Sam. And one of the things I really liked was you talked about the role that Sarah and Joseph Rogers played in shaping the moral foundation of Steve Rogers, and how they continue to influence his view of what it means to look out for those people that need help. But Sam, had very different parents with different experiences and a very different childhood. And Paul and Darlene Wilson influence him in very different ways. And so he comes to the role of Captain America with a very different perspective and a worldview about what that job means. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how that difference falls out between the Rogers family and the Wilson family?
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually wish we knew more. I mean, I love it when writers focus on Steve's parents, even though that was not necessarily a happy period in his life. His father, I think, was more of a cautionary tale to him. His father was one of the millions of Americans that lost their job in the Great Depression. Unfortunately, he didn't react to it well. He fell into alcoholism. He beat Steve's mother, unfortunately. And he started blaming others for his problems rather than picking himself up. And I think that served as an example for Steve not to emulate. In fact, Steve mentions that to Tony Stark here. He'll bring in Tony Stark for a good reason. When Tony Stark's in the gutter, when he has an alcoholic relapse, and Steve finds him in the gutter and says, I remember this with my father. You can't let this beat you. I realize it's hard. I realize it's one day at a time, but I'll help you, but you have to do the work to bring yourself back. And Steve's mother, of course, was the one telling him, no matter who beats you down, always stand up, always stand up, always do the right thing, never compromise your principles if you can avoid it. Remember, there's one episode where I think he steals some medicine for her because she's sick, and she tells him to take it back, apologize, offer to work off the cost. You don't do this. He says, "Well, Mom, I got to help you. You're dying." She says, "It's not important enough for you to compromise yourself." So she really gives him the foundation, not only for right action, but also for the determination, the never give up, the resolve it, the, I can do this all day kind of thing. But it was mostly about standing up. I don't want to make this sound selfish, but I look at it as more, standing up for yourself, standing up for your family. Don't let people beat you down. Keep fighting.
Resilience. Yeah.
Resilience, right. But resilience, fairly focused resilience, where Paul and Darlene Wilson were both very active in their community, and it was all about helping the community and considering everyone in the community's interests along with your own. When Sam lost his father was intervening in a gunfight and tried to get the gangsters to stop fighting, and he ended up getting killed in the fight. And Sam lashed out at his mother, said, "Why did he do this? Why did he leave us? What did he gain? Why was he helping them and forgot about us?" And she had to tell him that he was helping others. He was serving the community. He wasn't just thinking of himself. And unfortunately, he wasn't thinking about us. He was thinking about everybody else. And that's what you have to do. And that's part of also the fact that they're living as Black Americans. And they, at the time, and then it hasn't changed completely, but, very oppressed, even more than now. And they had to stick together. Now, and I'm surprised that this wasn't emphasized more with the Rogers family too, because of course they were Irish immigrants, and I'm sure they had the same strong ties within the Irish community, because most immigrant groups that came to New York City in the early 20th century gathered in enclaves in the Irish neighborhood and Italian neighborhood and Polish neighborhood. So you'd expect the Irish immigrants to have stuck together, but who knows? Again, we don't know that much about Joseph and Sarah Rogers. So maybe that will be explored in a later story. But we know that Sam, both his parents were extremely community minded, and this led to Sam becoming a social worker himself. And even when he becomes Captain America, he is decidedly more proactive on social and political issues than Steve Rogers is. And he decided, when I see a problem, I'm going to speak out, where, Steve would always try to stay neutral, try to get people to calm down, talk to each other, settle their problems without choosing sides, where Sam was more, having the experience, again, growing up Black in America, not having the luxury of kind of remaining neutral on issues. Sam was more ready to step in and say, okay, this side's right, this side's wrong, knowing that many people would disagree with them and would even disagree with the thought that a Black man was pronouncing on these issues for everybody else. But that proactivity that Sam reluctantly embraced but came to embrace, mainly inspired by his parents, because how my parents would never have given up a fight that they believed was right. So how can I, with this new power I have as a national hero, not do the same thing? And I loved how, in one aspect, I can't remember exactly where it came out, but talking about the difference in their upbringings based on their race, was that Sam said Steve always has trust that the institutions will do the right thing. And, based on Sam's upbringing, he can't have that same trust because he saw those institutions from a different angle. And that leads Steve to think, well, we'll just let SHIELD handle it. We'll let the government handle it. We'll let the courts handle it. And Sam's like, well, I don't know. I don't know if we can trust that these institutions will do the right thing, because that hasn't been Sam's experience or his community's experience through his whole life.
Yeah. Well, it's worth the price of admission just for that extra material in chapter 7. So, I mean, I think it's a really profound analysis, and I encourage everybody to, to read it, because if you don't appreciate Sam Wilson as Captain America yet, I think you will if you read that chapter.
Wow, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, chapter 7, whatever. I want to talk about chapter 6 and why that's important. Because Mark referenced something in chapter 6 where he cites the first of Timothy Snyder's 20 Lessons of Tyranny, which was, do not obey in advance.
Mm.
In other words, don't unquestioningly invest too much trust and faith in our leaders. And, whether that's any type of authority figure or even like Cap, a moral exemplar.
Mm.
Hydra Cap was able to rise to his power because people, even his colleagues, his fellow heroes, looked up to him and they trusted Steve to be the good guy, and they were willing to give him unchecked power without ever stopping to really critically question his motives, his agenda. And I'd like to think that heroes kind of learn their lesson from this experience with Steve. But what can we, the readers, the listeners, what can we learn from this, Mark?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And that reminds me of something I learned from my parents, who, taught me many things, but perhaps the most important thing and what's lasted with me, much to the disappointment of anyone I've worked for, is never automatically obey authority. Always question authority, always question what they tell you to do. Not menial little things, not, go, write this report or something, but when they tell you to do something you think is wrong, you have to stand up and say no. Or, convince me why this is the right thing to do. Don't just tell me to do it. I don't think I should do this. And so, always, the I remember I saw a screening of a movie once called Compliance, which was about
Yeah, it's a
real
freaky.
yeah, a real world incident in Ohio where a man was calling into fast food restaurants claiming to be a police officer, saying, "Oh, you have an escaped criminal in your restaurant. You need to listen to my orders, and we'll come catch him." And so they'll talk to the manager and they'll say, "Oh, you have to lock the doors, you have to do this, you have to do that." And it makes sense at first. And the managers, "Oh, yes, sir, of course we'll do that. Okay, what do we do next? What do we do next?" But it gets so twisted, soon after that, where he's actually saying, "Okay, bring your assistant manager in, and you're going to have to start kissing them." And it gets into deviance. I mean,
It
deviance
did.
in the
Yeah.
fact that this is not what they should be doing in a place of business. But the idea that this happens so gradually and these orders evolved so gradually, and people just kept their automatic obedience to authority through it all. And that's why the movie's called Compliance, because this was a dramatic interpretation of these real world events where people did this just because they're so used to doing what they're told, especially when it comes from a valid authority. And after the screening was over, they asked, or the one of the people leading the post screening discussion said, "We were all raised to do what we were told." And I kind of look around, everyone's raising their hand, and I'm like, "What? Who?" I wasn't. I was raised to question, except when my parents told me something to do. But anyone
Right.
else, they would say, if it seems wrong, then say something.
Hmm.
That's wrong. I'm not going to do that, or convince me why I should do that. And I mean, after Secret Empire is over and everyone realizes this, even Captain America says, people should have questioned, me, should have questioned Hydra Cap. They shouldn't have gone along with it. I mean, you're absolutely right in that Hydra Cap exploits Captain America's sterling, unquestionable reputation to help him acquire all the power. I mean, he would say, put me in charge of Shield, I'll fix this. Give me this government authority, I'll fix this. Give me these, suspend habeas corpus, I'll fix it. And I would say, okay, Captain America, of course, Captain America will do this.
Only
And
he can fix it.
what?
Only he could fix it.
Oh, right, right. And of course,
Yeah.
he builds this expectation, partly by stoking these fears of things that aren't happening. And then, of course, only I can fix it because it doesn't actually exist. That's another, fascist ploy. But the idea that, even there's quotes in the book from Sam and from T'Challa saying, it's Captain America. Why would we question Captain America? If there's one person I can believe, it's Captain America. And by the end of the story, you're exactly right. They learned that they took this too far. And if anyone, no matter how much you respect or admire them, says something that seems off, you have to consider, yeah, I usually trust this person, but this doesn't seem right. And you have to realize that nobody's perfect. And even if someone is genuinely admirable and genuinely deserving of respect and some benefit of the doubt, you always have to keep a little bit of skepticism in your mind to say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Maybe they were having an off day. I remember in being in a meeting once with a colleague that was always generally a decent guy, and one day he just starts cutting off people when they're saying stuff. And some of us thought, well, boy, that guy's turned into a real jerk. And then others of us were like, maybe he's just having a bad day.
Was it Kobik? Could have been Kobik.
Could have been Kobik. Who
Could have been
knows?
Kobik.
But the next time we had a meeting, he was back to normal. So I figured he's just having a bad day. It doesn't make what he was doing right, but it doesn't make him a bad guy for having one bad day. But all of us have bad days. All of us make mistakes. None of us is perfect. So to bring it back to the question, the lesson that the heroes learn, and we'll see if this ever happens again, was as much as they admire Captain America, he isn't perfect. And of course, he would be the first one to tell them, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm just a guy trying to help out, and I make my mistakes. And I never told you all to listen to me and obey all my words, because I would never say that. It's kind of like the whole Cat Mania thing at the beginning of the Hero's Return run, again, written by Mark Waid and drawn by Ron Garney, when everyone comes back from the Heroes Reborn world, and there's all and Cap is there's a movie about Captain America, about his life, not a fictional movie. And there's Captain America figures, everything. He's very uncomfortable with it, and he doesn't want to be a role model. He doesn't want to be a moral exemplar. He rejects that. He wants, just everyone to remember the principles of heroism, and he's always tries to set a good example, but he doesn't want people necessarily follow him, because that's not what he is. So we've seen this kind of reaction to Cap before, and him resisting it, saying this doesn't end well. Especially when at the end of that storyline, it's actually a Skrull impersonating Captain America again, to use the trust that people have in him towards their own ends.
Well, Mark, I got to say, this has been a really enjoyable conversation. It's always fun waxing philosophically with you about Cap. You are always welcome to come back here anytime. But tell us, what is coming up for you in the future, right? You just released this new edition of this book, but anything else you want to tell listeners about?
Just the blog keeps coming, and I'm finishing up the Heroes Reborn, the volume 2, the Heroes Reborn, era, short era, luckily. Now I'm writing into the volume 3, the Heroes Return era, which was one of my favorites in terms of both Captain America and Avengers, which was drawn by George Perez, who's just one of my all-time favorite artists. Unfortunately left us recently. And my next superhero related book will be about 4 people that are all over my walls here. The stretchy guy, the invisible woman. Well, that's literally her name, but the Fantastic Four. So
yeah,
right.
I've reread everything. I've taken literally hundreds of pages of notes, which now I have to try to sort through. And it's the same process with every book, try to sort through, collect themes, put ideas together. And that's both the most creative part of the book, I think, as well as the scariest part, because until I find that connecting thread or that narrative that flows through, what is it now? 60 years of stories, more than that. No, 60 years of stories, 65, whatever. Until I find that, then I don't have a book yet. And so I have to, until I find that, I've got the haystack. But instead of finding the needle in it, I have to find the needle and the thread to go through the haystack and make sense out of this mass of stuff.
All right, you know what? I don't want a dime for this, okay? But I'm going to tell you right now, the thread for Fantastic Four, family.
Well, yeah. But no, that's the thing. They're a family, not a team. They're adventurers. They're not heroes, and that's great. But I mean, that's been said, and that's been explored by a lot of people. And I it's hard for me to find anything to elaborate philosophically about that. So I have to look for other things, ethical things, existential things, identity things. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff in there about Reed's approach to science and the way he thinks about science and the way he incorporates ethics into how he does science, and the way that he puts knowledge at the top of the pedestal, as opposed to Doom, who acquires knowledge for power and conquest. So the whole idea of the value of knowledge, I think that's going to be a part of it, but that's going to just be a part of, I imagine there's going to be a section for each character and philosophical topics about each character, and then probably sections about different storylines and other characters and stuff. And plus, what I find most fascinating about the Fantastic Four is, you know, except for the Thing, on occasion, none of them really work well as solo characters. And replacement members work well for a while, but they never stick around. It's those four. And they fit so well together.
Except for that robot, right? What was the robot? Was that
Herbie?
Herbie. Yeah, Herbie the robot.
But and I've actually this is probably the one aspect of the book I've done the most work on, is but I don't know if it make a good book, but you can actually look at each pair within the team, and each pair has a unique relationship. So Reed to Sue, and Reed to Johnny, and Johnny to Ben, and Johnny to Sue, and Ben to Reed. I mean, all those pairs within the four have their own unique relationship, and no one of them is lesser. And it's really the whole idea of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. That's absolutely the case, but it's also a whole that can't be changed that much, and that's fascinating to me. I don't know really what to make of that, but it just amazes me and always has. The first time I read through the whole run was about 10 years ago, and I wrote an article for another website called The Cultural Gutter, and just said how this is amazing that there is this kind of stability. I mean, the Avengers change members all the time. The Justice League changes members all the time. The Fantastic Four, partly because they're a family, always stays the same and always lasts and always stays relatively positive. I mean, most of the members have died. They've all gone through tragedy. Sue lost a kid. They've been through all this tragedy, but they always stay optimistic. It's never, that title has almost never become dark and dismal. Which again is amazing. Given most superheroes, path through despair and born again and all this stuff.
It's not amazing, Mark. It's fantastic.
Fantastic. Yes. Yeah.
So when is the book coming out? Because the movie, I know you like to tie it in with the movie.
You just answered the question.
The movie comes out July 25th of next year. The book
will
comes out.
Be out a couple months before that.
That's the pressure.
Yeah,
I gotta say,
yeah.
I
I'm
felt
talking to you guys instead.
I felt bad because I know that this new edition for your Captain America book was supposed to tie in with the release of the movie, and then the movie got moved from this summer to now February of 2025, but your book still came out.
Well, the publisher actually gave me the option. The publisher was great and said, we have the book done. We obviously plan to publish it this year. We can either do that and go ahead, or we can hold it until closer when the movie comes out. And I preferred to have it out sooner, of course, because I wrote it. I want to see it. Plus, my original thought was not to tie to the movie, but was to be a 10th anniversary update. So for that purpose, I wanted it to come out in 2024. But I mean, if they wanted to hold it till the movie, I would have completely understood. It would have been an agonizing wait to have this thing done and not see it because they've got to hold it for the movie. But, luckily my publisher was, like I said, gave me the total choice about that. So, I mean, I have a chance to promote the book as the 10th anniversary update with podcasts like this. And then I have a chance when the movie comes out, I'll do something else. I'll probably focus whatever promotion I do then on the additional Sam material, because Sam is the lead character in the new movie.
Well, it is the Virtues of Captain America, a modern day lessons on character from a World War II superhero.
It's blurring it, isn't it? Oh,
yeah.
there it goes.
And this is the second edition. And so highly recommend everybody to go check it out, even if you got the first edition, because there's so much extra material. And then also don't forget to check out Mark's blog, thevirtuesofcaptainamerica.com, to get updates. Mark, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you, guys. This was a great time.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, Bob. That was a lot of fun having Mark back on the show. Always fun. Getting into philosophical discussions around our favorite character. What'd you think?
I had I had a ton of fun, Rick. I enjoyed the first time we talked to him. I enjoyed the second time we talked to him. This revised edition adds so much more material. Some of it, as we talked about, a little bit controversial because of the Hydra Cap storyline, but it really does provide a lot of food for thought. And he's a philosopher, he's a scholar, and so he can jawbone about these things for hours or days, which is what I enjoy, and I hope some of the readers enjoy it as well, because there's a lot here to think about and chew on. And you can go back as he did, because he talked about it, went back and reread, some of these story arcs, and there's always something more to get out of it. And I think that's a great story. That's great writing when you can go back, revisit something as we did with the Rick Remender run, and you can get something new and fresh out of it. So it's a great conversation. I encourage folks to pick it up. And I'm certainly going to plow through it again.
Yeah, speaking of going through it again, in preparation for this, I wanted to go back and re-listen to episodes 30 and 108. And I was at the gym this morning, and I'm working out, and I'm listening to the podcast, and I'm just really enthralled by it, right? I'm really getting into it. And then I've done the workout. I'm in the locker room, and I'm it's time to take a shower before I head off to work. And I get into the shower. I still have my earbuds in.
Oh my goodness.
I was so into the conversation that I was just like, I get into the shower with the earbuds. I was like, oh no, what do I do now?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So check it out. If you really, want to have a great listen, check out episode 30 and then come back for episode 108. Bob, next episode, we are going to come back to our ongoing long tail story of the Secret Empire. So we're going to review part 3, which is Captain America 172, which came out in 1974 by Steve Englehart and Sal Buscema. So we're going to be covering part 3 of the Secret Empire next episode.
Oh, that's great. Those long stories are really fun, because for a lot of us, we haven't read them in a really long time. So for us, it's great to get back into them and have a chance to digest them again with maybe a different set of eyes, older eyes. But I think for a lot of listeners too, who haven't maybe read that in a while, maybe it inspires them to pick up those stories again as well.
Yep. Well, Bob, as always, been a lot of fun wrapping Cap with you.
Indeed. I can't wait till next week.
All right. He's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis. And if you don't mind, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. And we always love hearing your reviews, whether it is on Spotify or Apple or even in our Facebook page. So until then, thank you for listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.